Hello, everybody. Welcome. I am so excited to be kicking off today's webinar. My name is Kelly Booz, and I'm the proud director of the AFT's Share My Lesson. Before we begin, I'm going to go over quick housekeeping items, and I will be back with you in just a second.
Welcome to Share My Lesson webinars. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, let's go over a few housekeeping tips. We'd love to create an interactive and engaging space. Please open the group chat widget. Tell us where you're from and why you chose this webinar today. This is also your place to interact with other participants and our presenters. Express your thoughts. Using the reactions widget, you can provide feedback about the presentation. Your feedback is invaluable to us and our presenting team. If you have questions for the presenters, use the Q&A widget to ask them. For technical support during a live session, we've got you covered. You can ask tech questions in the same widget. If your screen freezes or you lose audio, please refresh your browser. If you're in search of resources for this session, you can find them listed in the resource list widget. When the webinar concludes, please take a moment to rate and review this session. This helps Share My Lesson users find the best content and influences future webinars. You may be here for professional development credit. To qualify, watch for at least 35 minutes of the presentation and answer at least 2 poll questions. These will appear under the slide widget. At the end of the session, click on the certificate icon to download your certificate. From all of us on the AFT Share My Lesson team, thank you for joining us and enjoy the webinar.
Hey, great. And just to get everyone oriented for our educators who are joining us today, I'm pushing our very first poll question so we get a sense of how many years of experience you have in education. So if you can submit that, that should be popping up on your screen right now. And while we're waiting on that, those results, I'm going to just do a quick opening. First of all, before we dive in, I want to let you know that AFT President Randi Weingarten will be joining us to close out this session today. She is so thrilled to be here, but has a personal obligation that she's with right now. So I will just say that first, Jason Reynolds, we're so excited to have you here. You're such an inspiring author whose books have inspired so many countless young people, helping them feel valued and connected. And not only that, as part of our AFT book clubs that we've been doing throughout 2024, we've been asking our members which author do they want to hear from. And by far, Jason Reynolds was the top requested author. We're also so excited to be joined by Dave Isay, the founder of StoryCorps. Dave's work is all about preserving and celebrating the voices of everyday people, and one of the most meaningful projects, the Great Thanksgiving Listen, which I know he'll be sharing more about with you today, invites students to connect with their elders in their lives by recording their stories. It's such a simple yet powerful way to build empathy and create connections, which I think all of us could agree right now we could use more of. So I see lots of folks using those little emoji buttons. It's a lot of fun to see. We see them floating up on our screen, so continue to send that love. I also see folks using the attendee chat. If you can't get into the attendee chat because we have, it's quite the list of people joining us today, you can also use that Q&A box to submit any questions or thoughts that you might have, and we will be taking questions towards the end. All right, so let me see how folks are doing. We have a lot of experienced educators joining us today. Dave, are you, I'm going to pass this over to you in just a second, just to say thank you. Dave called me up like maybe a week and 2 days ago and said, hey, do you want to do this event together? And we said, I think, yes, of course, 100%. Yes, we want to do this. And somehow we pulled this off, and we're so excited. And Jason, so excited to have you joining us as well. So Dave, let me turn this over to you. And again, Randi will be joining us toward the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And thanks to the AFT. This is a world record quick pull together event, and we're thrilled to be here. And especially thank you to Jason, for joining us. So I can see in the chat that everybody wants to hear from Jason, as do I. So I'm going to make this really, really quick. I don't know if you're familiar with StoryCorps, but I'll talk about that for just a couple of seconds. So we're a nonprofit, a massive oral history project. We started in Grand Central Terminal about 20 years ago. And you bring anybody who you want to honor to this StoryCorps booth. And now we're all over the country. We have Airstream trailers that travel around. And it's two people who come. You bring your grandma, you bring your dad, you bring your mom, and anybody who you want to honor by listening to their story. You come to the booth, you're met by a facilitator who works for StoryCorps, who brings you inside, and the door shuts and you're in complete silence, a sacred space, the lights are low, and you sit across from your grandma for 40 minutes and you ask questions and you listen. And I had made radio documentaries for many decades before starting StoryCorps, and knew that the microphone gives you the license to say things, to ask things that you've normally not talked about with your loved one. It's a chance to say the important things to the people who are most important to you. So in these sessions, everybody cries, incredibly intense. At the end of the 40 minutes, you get a copy, and another one stays with StoryCorps and goes to the Library of Congress, so your great-great-great-grandkids can get to know your grandmother through her voice and story. We've had about 700,000 people participate in the last 20 years, the largest single collection of human voices ever gathered. And essentially what we're doing is collecting the wisdom of humanity. And we have always, teachers have been critical to StoryCorps all the way through. We love educators, we love teachers. And I saw in the comments that a lot of people need a little inspiration, a little uplift. So we thought that we would do this this weekend. And we're also going to talk about the Great Thanksgiving Listen, which is the kind of educator celebratory piece of StoryCorps. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But for now, I want to talk about a young man who came to work at StoryCorps as a facilitator maybe 19 years ago. These facilitators are the people who sit, as I said, in the booth with you, bearing witness to the interviews. And I think it was one of his first jobs, if not his first official job after school. So let's listen to a practice interview that young facilitator Jason Reynolds recorded with a fellow facilitator early in his tenure at StoryCorps. Kelly?
My mom, she's definitely my angel.
Yeah.
I have fond memories of being a child, and the first thing she told me to say was, I can do anything. I had to say it every night before I go to bed. Whether I said, the Lord's Prayer and all of that wasn't of its importance. She'd much rather me just say, I can do anything. She drilled that into my head really early in life. So when I was going through my confusing years of high school, and I was ripping and running and I was cutting up and acting a fool, I think she always knew he'll come back. And so looking back on it, it's like, wow, I may have been one of the luckiest guys to have a mother who was so open-minded. She never told me to hold in my words, or she never, if I had a problem with something, she'd express it. Never mute yourself.
After StoryCorps, do you have an idea of where you want to go next?
I want to be a writer, and that's my ultimate goal, man. I want to shock the world. That's my ultimate goal. But in order for that to happen, I gotta live.
And through StoryCorps, this is a way of, seeing the life.
Constant inspiration. I really believe that every person walking this earth has a story. Everybody has a story that could change the outlook of life for somebody else.
So without further ado, it is my honor to introduce Jason Reynolds.
Hi, everybody. It's always, thank you, Dave and Kelly. I appreciate y'all. It's always a little surreal to see, kid Jason trying to figure it all out. Hi, everyone. It's good. I wish I could see your faces, but I can't. But I'm thankful for technology. Nonetheless, I appreciate you all joining us at this particular time. When I got the call from my buddy Dave to be part of this, he said, man, we just need some encouragement, right? Teachers, I know you love the teachers love you. We just need, we're going through whatever we're going through, and we need to figure out a way to make sure that the most important civil servants in this country feel motivated to continue to face the fight in front of them. And I thought to myself, I said yes to Dave because I always say yes to Dave. But I thought to myself in that moment, I'm trying to figure out how to encourage myself, right? Like I'm going through whatever I'm going through. It's so interesting to see that image in that video and to hear my voice, see that the image of me and my mother and to hear my voice, because first, let me say this. I'm going to share some things with you all. Man, has anyone ever seen me speak? If you've seen me speak, you know that the way this happens is it feels a bit like a meander, but I promise we're going to go somewhere. But the only way that I can process my life is through storytelling. And so that's what we're going to do. Okay. I want to first let me prep everybody in case you don't know me or you don't know how I work. So I'm going to tell you this story. It begins with a fall. In May of this year, I get a phone call that my mother, who anyone who knows anything about me knows is my favorite person, that she had fallen out of the bed. Now, she didn't actually fall out of the bed. She was laying in bed with her feet elevated on two pillows. And you know how sometimes the pillows can just get a little slippery, and so the pillows fell out of the bed and they took her feet with her. And once her feet went, she wasn't able to sort of keep the rest of her body from staying in the bed. So it was more like a slide out of the bed. So there was no broken bones or any kind of real impact on her body sort of hitting the floor. The issue, though, is that my mother, who is about to be 80 years old, didn't have and doesn't have the upper body strength to get herself up off the floor. And so she's down there for about 18 hours or so until her sister comes over. I'm out of town. So until her sister comes over and realizes she hasn't spoken to my mom, goes in the house and finds my mom on the floor. My mom was fine, but just on the floor, crawling around the house trying to figure out how to get herself up. I get home, I go to my mom's house. We take her to the ER to make sure that there's no internal bleeding. She had some sort of muscular pain because of all the crawling. So we wanted to do our due diligence because of her age and her medical history to make sure that everything was on the up and up. And the doctors do a sonogram and a CT scan and so forth and so on. And they're like, we see that there is some sort of activity in your abdomen, but we're not sure what it is. And since we're not sure what it is, we're going to send you home and, we'll schedule an appointment for a later date. No problem. My mom goes home and the next day she calls me and says, hey, there's something on my stomach and I'm not sure what it is. And when your parent says things, I'm like, Mom, I don't know what you're like. I understand the words, but I don't know what this means. There's something on my stomach, right? And she's like, well, I went to the restroom and when I was in the bathroom, I realized there's a fluid that's kind of on my stomach. And I'm like, well, where is it coming from? And she's like, I don't know, but I just wiped it up. And then I got myself together. And then later on in the day, I checked again and there was more fluid just kind of in my stomach region, right? Which was weird. So I'm like, well, let's go to the doctor. So we take her back to the ER. And this time they send her to a better hospital. And the better hospital does all the same scans. And the hospital says, what you have is called a fistula. Now, I don't know. I know that teachers are very smart people, but I don't know if any of y'all know what a fistula is. I didn't know what a fistula was, but the basic premise of a fistula is that something in the body has malfunctioned and has started to maybe drip a particular fluid, right? So there's many different kinds and ways that this could happen, right? For instance, one organ could create a bridge based on a leak in the organ. It could create a bridge to another organ that it's not supposed to be attached to. They cause unnatural attachments, right? Unnatural pathways. It's the strangest thing in the world. In my mother's case, what she was experiencing was her small intestine had begun to drip. It can come from surgeries and illnesses and infections and cancers, and all these things can cause this to happen in the body over time. And over time, her small intestine had been dripping, leaking, and the body trying to protect itself, the leak sort of, it sort of tunnels, it creates its own sort of tubing. And in her case, that tubing did not connect to another organ. It pushed itself toward the skin and out of the skin. So the fluid that my mom kept seeing in her stomach was fluid directly coming from her small intestine, trying to get out of the body. It had made its own pathway out of the body. Strangest thing I ever heard. And my mom has been through lots of medical things, and this one was a bit of a doozy. We said, well, how do we treat it? What do we do? They say, well, we're going to hospitalize her, and we're going to give her weeks and weeks and weeks, 2 months worth of antibiotic. And we're like, okay. And while she's getting this antibiotic, we're also going to do wound care. We're going to make sure that the fistula doesn't get worse. We're going to make sure that it doesn't reroute itself to any other place in her body. We're going to make sure that she's comfortable, clean. Because of what is coming out of the body, we have to make sure that we stay on top of it because it is poisonous, right? It's a part of her bile system. And so the family is, of course, rocked by this. I'm rocked by this. My mom is rocked by this. But we're also the kind of family that's like, look, is it going to kill her, right? That's the kind of people we are. We're very sort of like, listen, major organs, are all of them okay? They're all fine. Does she have any tumors in her body? No tumors, sir. Is this going to be to her detriment? Is this going to be the thing? And they're like, no. Well, then as far as I'm concerned, this is pretty good news, right? The unfortunate part, though, was that she had to be in the hospital at this age for all this time. And so she's in the hospital for the first 2 months. They're giving her antibiotics. And after that, they realize that there's still more work to do. There's still more sort of antibiotic to give. And so instead of them keeping her in the hospital, they say now, because of manpower and politics and healthcare, we now have to send you to a rehabilitation center where you will spend the next 3 months getting the same treatment until we can get this thing under control. Now, at this point, my mom is, of course, really frustrated, but I'm sort of like, look, we got to do whatever we got to do to get you back home. So let's do it. So we take her to the best rehabilitation center that I can find. We get her all checked in, and we start this process. Every day I show up. Every single day I show up with better food than what they're serving because my mom is very persnickety and doesn't like to eat everybody's food. She complained the first week about the food not having enough salt, not having enough sugar. The coffee's burnt. They keep giving me powdered eggs, right? And I kept trying to explain to her that this was not a restaurant, right? This was a nursing home and a rehabilitation center. Her roommates were all very unkind, but you know they're in there sick too, and that was unfortunate. The nurses eventually became really kind to my mother after they realized that she'd be there a long time and that she had a supportive family who would be there every day to make sure that everybody was doing what they were supposed to do. By the way, quick side note to any of you who have parents in these facilities, my heart goes out to you. It is a complicated thing. It is a really, really tricky thing to navigate. And I understand what it takes to advocate for your loved one, how exhausting it is. But we're going through the process. And in the middle of it all, my mother and I started having very real conversations. My mother gets frustrated. She begins to grieve a part of her that she believes she will no longer get back to. She starts to feel pity, but pity has such a negative connotation. I'd rather just say she feels mournful and she felt disappointed and she felt defeated because it seemed like she would be in the hospital for forever. And so the two of us would talk about how this doesn't have to be a forever thing. We discussed sort of her strength. She'd tell me how exhausted she was from having to be tired. A woman who worked in education, worked in special education to be exact, who felt like she had given her life, had done everything right, and yet she couldn't seem to escape strange and abnormal medical issues. And eventually the day would come where it was time for her to come home. And so my cousins and I, we all go, my brothers, siblings, family, we all sort of show up. And we're ready to take her home, and she's ready to go home. She's been begging. All the nurses were clapping for her. They all told me, your mother been begging to get out of here for the last 2 weeks. She's been driving us crazy, getting on our nerves because she says she's ready to go. She says she's better now, though the fistula has not gone away because fistulas technically don't ever go away. They close up some, but they don't always heal on their own. Sometimes they do, but usually they don't. There has to be surgery involved, and we're doing our best to avoid the surgery, but she was good enough to come home. She had been laying in a hospital bed since May, and now the month was October. And so we get her in the car and we drive her home, and she's ready to live on her own again. And and she's telling me she wants to drive again, and she's telling me she can't wait for Thanksgiving, and she's telling me all these things. And the biggest issue is that because she laid in a hospital bed since May, all of her muscles have atrophied. And so she can't walk. She can't put a shirt on. She can't get to the bathroom. She can't make food for herself. All of her motor skills have been compromised by her stillness. Everything sort of in a strange, both stasis and metastasis at the same time, as she's trying to figure out, her brain is saying, I have my whole life to get back to. And her body is saying, your life is no longer your life. We don't know how you plan to do that. Now, me being the son that I am, being our relationship, the first thing I do is I get on the phone with everybody. I'm calling doctors. I'm on the phone with Medicare. I'm on the phone with the home care people. I'm talking to my friends who have businesses and know people who are physical therapists and so forth and so on, occupational therapists, right? So I'm calling everybody. I'm like, look, we need to get some help in here. I need to make sure my mother has the best care possible. America is a tricky, tricky place when it comes to the healthcare system. But for those of us with a little extra, I'm like, I'm going to take advantage of all of my advantages to make sure that my mother has the best resources that she can have, so that we can get her back to some sense of normalcy, because she needs to go on with her life. If she begins to think that she can't go on with her life, then she won't. Now I know this, and so I'm really working hard. I'm doing all the things I need to do. And so a physical therapist does come over, right? We get one to come by. Now, when the physical therapist comes over, I happen to be on the road. I'm somewhere else talking to a bunch of kids. I called that night, Mom, how was physical therapy? How do you feel? I don't like it, Jason. She didn't do this. She didn't do that. She came late. She had curlers in her hair. My mother was, if you know my mother, you know how my mother is. Like, she had curlers in her hair when she showed up. There was all sorts of things like that, right? I'm like, but how was the exercise? She said, man, it wasn't nothing. She ain't do nothing. Right? My mom is so angry about it. I'm like, well, maybe she'll come back again and it'll be better. She comes by a second time. I'm still not there, right? I'm somewhere else now. I'm popping in and out of town, and I just so happen to be missing every appointment. I call my mother later. Mom, how was therapy? Man, Jason, I need you to get rid of her, fire her, and find me somebody else now. And I say, okay. Last week, and this is all very true. I'm trying to process my life and your life, by the way. This is for all of us, but I'm working it out as I'm going through this. That last week, I'm sitting in my mom's house. We're hanging out, and she's sad. Every sort of 2 hours, there are crying spells. We're having a conversation around her dependence and her independence. And I ask her if she thinks that because of her life, because of the way she was raised, a Southern Black woman from South Carolina, born in 1945, 1955, moves to Washington, D.C. 1960, takes her first job in the mailroom and works that job until she's 50 years old, retires, and then goes into the school and works in special ed. Raised kids on her own, first person to graduate from college in our family, first person to buy a house in our family, and moved everybody in so that they can then make enough money to buy their own houses, right? We're talking about the catalyst for all upward mobility in our family, the person who felt like her parents didn't love her because she was the one who was always expected to be great, the middle child. Oldest baby needed to feel special for being the eldest, the leader of the group. Youngest baby needed to feel special for being the baby, but that middle girl, so her mother told her, that middle girl they were never concerned about, not realizing my mother needed to hear, I love you, I got you, I will protect you, I will help you, but it was never the case in her life. Siblings who did the same thing to her, nieces, nephews. She raised everybody's kids and us and all of my friends. And I'm asking her, do you think at some point there comes a time where you become dependent on your independence? And she said, well, isn't everybody dependent on their independence? I said, no. I mean like an unhealthy dependence on your independence. Do you think that you are allergic to assistance? and that the mere notion that you might need a little help, that in this particular juncture of your life, things are changing and you may need a helping hand, but to you, that sounds like both of your hands are being cut off. And so we're talking, and she says, yeah, I think so. I think so. And I said, why is that? She said, well, son, I've always felt it was more important for me to feel useful than to feel loved. And I'm sitting there and I'm recording it all on my cell phone because I record everything that she says to me. And for a second, my heart breaks for her. And then we hear a car pull up in front of the house. Now, my mom sits in this room where it's a big window because my mom is the nosiest person in the neighborhood. And so she sits here all day long, and she does sit all day long, and she stares out this window. And I should give you some backstory. When I say all day, I mean this old lady gets up, gets out of the bed, and comes to the next room over and sits in this room in a lazy boy with a television and watches politics the whole day. Right, this is her thing, right? She watched all the campaigning. She watches every pundit. She watched election night. This is her, like, she just locks into politics. I mean, she goes back and forth from all the different channels. She's got her favorites. I just left her house a moment ago. I told her I don't want to see Velshi right now. Like, but we had to watch Velshi. We got to, like, it's like a whole, like, this is like, it's just like locked into the American political system, locked into the cultural context and the cultural landscape at any given moment, let alone this one, right? But my mom is like zeroed into her. This is the greatest and most devastating show on TV. This is both a comedy and a horror and a drama, right? But she can't turn away. And so the car pulls up and I say, who is that? And my mother rolls her eyes and says, oh, I forgot to tell you that physical therapist is coming today. And I'm like, oh, great. I get to talk to her. And if I'm going to fire her, at least I had enough respect for her to fire her to her face, right? Like if we're going to have a parting discussion, at least it's to her face, right? Everybody deserves, that I can look her in the eye and say what it is that we're looking for in this particular moment and thank her for her service. And we can move on and I can figure out something else for you. My mother's like, thank God, can't wait, right? So I open the door. I meet the lady at the door. Her name is Charmaine. I see Charmaine and I say, Charmaine, we haven't met. I have been out of town. My name is Jason. I'm Isabel's son. And she said, oh, it's nice to meet you. I said, give her a second. She's back in the back using the restroom. But when she comes out, like, I'd like to sit in on your therapy. So have a seat on the couch because I also want to talk to you about a few things. And I said, my mother doesn't feel like she's getting the work that she needs. She doesn't feel like this is helping her at all. And Charmaine says, oh, yeah? I said, yeah. I said, I think she needs a little more rigor. I think, she needs a little more attention, a little more intention. And so, this is my mom. And I know you understand this because I know you would want your mom to be treated in the same way. You would want your mom to get back to some semblance of health as quickly and as possible if you could, right? And she's like, yes, of course. I said, so my question to you is it possible to find me somebody or for you to come in 4 to 5 days a week? Because right now you're only coming in once or twice maybe, and we need a little more. Now, in my mind, when I'm saying all of this, I'm thinking to myself, man, Jay, you taking care of your son's responsibilities. This is what a son is supposed to do. You're taking care of business, right? This is what she asked you to do, and you're looking out for it. You've worked very hard for the last 25 years of your life to build a life that can afford you the opportunity to get her the extra help she needs. Good on you, son. I'm already patting myself on the back, right? Good on you, son. You're taking care of business, right? And Charmaine looks me in the face and says, no. And in the moment, I'm very confused, right? Charmaine is like, no, Jason. And I'm like, no, as in like healthcare won't cover it, or no, as in you're just refusing to do so. Like what are we talking, right? Like, I need 4 to 5 days, Charmaine. Like, and if it's not you, cool, but I need somebody to come in here 4 to 5 days to work my mother out. And Charmaine looked at me and said, Jason, it is not my responsibility to get your mother walking again. It is her responsibility to get walking again. She said, my responsibility is to show her how. She said, but I can tell that she's not working because she's not getting better. So instead of you talking to me about all the things I need to do, I need you to talk to her about all the things she needs to do, right? I'm not offended. a little confused because according to my mother, this lady's not doing anything. So we go back into the room and I watch them go through the regiment for physical therapy. My mom starts off with complaining. Oh, you know, Charmaine, these legs don't really work no more. My ankles are all swollen, so forth and so on. I don't know what I'm going to do. Charmaine said, well, Ms. Reynolds, if fluid, the way fluid works in the body, whether it's blood, whether it's water, whatever the fluid is in the body, if you don't move, it don't move. So if you move, perhaps the fluid will then move, right? So we get my mother up. My mother starts walking up and down the hall, and her ankles go down. She said, look here, Ms. Reynolds, all you got to do is work your hips, your knees, your thighs. That's all you need. And we're going to open your legs up and get your stance together. And that's all you need to walk. Right? That's it. That's all you're going to have to, that's all you got to do. I've showed you these exercises so many times already, but you told your son I'm not doing anything. So I want to show him what to do. So if you do these things, I promise you, you'll be walking in the next month or so. Charmaine leaves my house and I look at my mother and I say, you know, I'm not firing her, right? My mother says, yeah, I know. I said, you know, you're wrong. And my mother says, I know. I'm just frustrated. And I said, I understand that. But the truth of the matter is that we have to do some work. Now, I want you all to know, my mother is now moving around. She was in there cutting ham a minute ago. I left the house a second ago and she was making lunch for herself. And she's up and she's walking. She's got a walker. Hopefully in a few weeks, we get her a cane. And we're doing our exercises every single day, and we're tending to the fistula every night. This morning, I woke up early. I went over there. I had to lay her down, and I had to tend to the wound. And I had to clean that fistula. I had to clean all the gunk that smells and is terrible. I had to clean that out. I had to dress the wound, and I had to tend to that thing that may be there for the rest of her life, maybe not. And I suppose that the question that all of you are asking in this moment is, what does this have to do with us? And the answer is rooted in what I've learned in this experience. And what I've learned is that what we all now know, no matter which way you lean, there is something internal that has been dripping, and we have not seen it. And it's been dripping, and it's been dripping, and it's been dripping, and it's been dripping. And in the midst of this thing that has been leaking, in the midst of this what seems to be a small malfunction, it has become a kind of poison that has created its own pathway and now has come to the surface. It has burrowed through the skin of our country, and it is leaking all over the place. It doesn't smell good. It doesn't look good. It definitely doesn't feel good. But the wound still has to be tended to. But while we're tending to it, we don't get to be distracted by the discomfort of it all. We don't get to sit down and lock into the nonsense. We don't get to do any of those things that we will convince ourselves are healing, only because what they're actually doing is putting us in a position to atrophy. And so in order for our children to have a fair shot, we have to do both things simultaneously. We have to tend to the wound and dress the wound, work on it so that it hopefully will close someday. But if not, we will manage it, while at the same time we have to move. We have to use our muscle. We have to use the things that we have to create forward progress. We have to use the things that we have that create autonomy, independence, change. If we sit and wallow in the television, in the narrative, in the media, in the fear, in the fighting, in the arguing, in the circus of it all, we will be paralyzed. And paralysis in this moment, for all of you who work with our children, will be far more maddening and far more frightening than the moment at large. And so I want to close, and I've been thinking about this all morning. The wound is there. We did not see it coming. Maybe some of us did, for that matter, but I did not see it coming. But the wound is there, and the wound is making a bit of a mess. But we can tend to it, right? We know what it means to tend to the open wound. We can tend to it, and it will heal at some point. But in the meantime, let's tend to the wound every day. We have to. My mother has to be clean twice a day. It isn't just a slapdash type of situation. You can't just put a Band-Aid on it. Every day there is a process in which I have to tend to the wound. For you, that might mean showing up to your classrooms and looking your babies in the face and doing the best you can to navigate a complicated time. You have to tend to the wound, but that also requires some motor skills, your body, your muscle to work, the muscle of your mind, the muscle of your heart, the muscle of your spirit. This is what I'm talking about. If not, there will be atrophy, and your babies will be wondering why you have become a statue too. Why you are just someone that we look at but can't feel anymore. Don't let it beat you. It almost beat my mother. It almost got her. Her dependence on independence, which means the last part, the last note, the last thing I've learned is that we all we got. And by the we, I mean all of we. Human beings have no other person to lean on but another human being. It's us. We're here together, all of us. So lean on your people. Reach out for assistance, for help. Do the same for the children in your classroom. Do the same for your family members, by the way. Also, give it to yourself, right? Give yourself moments to impart some health and some help into your own lives. And I do believe that we will be okay. Now, I'm going to ask Dave to come back on to talk about the great Thanksgiving listen, because I do believe that what I just said, though is all about me and is all about us, I think the one of the roots of it, one of the cornerstones of all of it will always be our ability to listen, our ability to tell our stories, our ability to control our narratives, and our ability to celebrate each other, even in trying times, by doing so. I appreciate y'all. Thank you very much.
Jason, thank you. I'm going to pass it to Randi real quick, and then come back. Randi, hi.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Jason. And as Jason was speaking, some of you may notice I came on around 3:15. A dear friend of mine lost his wife of 40 years to a hit accident of an ambulance driver who was rushing, hitting his wife, and never recovered. On Monday, they were at the zoo with their grandkids, and on Tuesday, she was gone. And just like Jason just talked about showing up for your friends, being at funerals, making sure you're there, showing gratitude. These are the moments right now when, politics don't go the way you want them to go. These are the moments right now where the reflection may be about the kind of care and concern that Jason just so beautifully talked about in terms of his mom, and the stories about the healers and the helpers, and the stories that we tell to each other and tell with each other, and the stories we tell as classroom teachers, as educators, as helpers. So Jason, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for sharing that story with us. Dave, thank you for all of what you do in terms of StoryCorps. And it's just a reminder about the power that we all have as school teachers, as helpers, as people who help figure out how our kids discern the world and navigate the world, how important storytelling is. So I wanted to just pop on here for a moment just to say thank you, and Dave to say thank you for your partnership and your relationship with all of us in terms of the work that we do. Giving out books, it's the work of teaching and learning. It's a work as we get to Thanksgiving and to these weeks of when we're seeing a lot of family and there's both hurt and joy. It's a work of binding the world together as a place that actually believes in the dignity of all of God's children and all of God's people. So thank you so much, both of you. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Randi, and we're sorry for your loss. And I do, coming off what Randy said, I mean, we can't be a country. We can't become a country where it's okay not to care about one another. And you all, educators, are the bulwark against that. And as someone said in the chat, you know, you're the fighters. I want to talk about we want this to be a moment of uplift also. I mean, I know it's a difficult time, and just being around Jason, I think, is an incredibly life-affirming experience to hear where his mind goes and his stories go. I want to talk about, and we'll bring Jason back for questions in a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Great Thanksgiving Listen, and encourage educators to be a part of this. So a few years ago, we created an app that makes it possible to record StoryCorps stories anytime, any place, and with one tap, upload them to the Library of Congress, so they become part of American history. And the tradition, the first tradition we created with this app is the Great Thanksgiving Listen, where we ask educators to encourage or assign students over the Thanksgiving weekend, or really any time before the holiday, to sit with an elder and record them, honor them, listen to them, ask them the questions they've always wanted to ask, and then have it become part of American history at the Library of Congress. And after the election, as Kelly said, we just decided that maybe this would be a good year to really kind of go do a full court press with the Great Thanksgiving Listen. And I know it's very, very last minute. There are 7, 8 days left of school before Thanksgiving, but we'd love to have you, create a bonus assignment of the Great Thanksgiving Listen if that's something that's of interest to you. And we'd be happy to answer questions about that. But it felt like kind of an inspiring, uplifting, moment to breathe activity in the classroom. We have a one-page how to do this, very quick startup guide, quick guide to how to do the Great Thanksgiving Listen. And we also have a pledge. If you want to do this, if you go to TGTL, that's the Great Thanksgiving Listen, tgtlpledge.org, pledge to do this, and tell another it's high school social studies and ELA mostly, but any classroom can do it. And we have a chance to uplift the stories of everyday people, to honor regular people all around us, and to remember what's important. And as I said at the beginning, to shine a light and raise the volume on the wisdom all around us, and the stories of everyday people, our families, our friends, when we just take the time to listen, and to remind kids that their stories, your students, that their lives and their stories and their parents and their grandparents, they're important, and they're valuable, and to just ground us again in the fact that all of our lives and all of our stories are infinitely important. So I hope you'll be a part of this. We can maybe we can record 50,000 stories over the weekend. What a great thing to do. Again, going back to Jason, to kind of start building muscle around our stories, and muscles around hope, and muscles around connection, and muscles around trust in institutions and each other. So we hope you'll be a part of that. Tell a couple of teachers about it, do it yourself, pledge to join, and anything we can do to help over the next bunch of days. Again, it's a lot to ask with only a couple days until Thanksgiving, but we'd love to have you be a part of this. So that is my Great Thanksgiving Listen pitch. And I also, the Great Thanksgiving Listen has always been about teachers. And before we go to some questions with Jason, it's always been students doing interviews, but also celebrating teachers. We're releasing an animation. Nobody's seen this yet, next week, which is our Great Thanksgiving Listen StoryCorps animation. Now, these stories are all, what you see are always 3-minute excerpts from 40-minute interviews that we record. If your kids, and we hope that you'll record also over Thanksgiving with a loved one, or with another teacher, or honor a teacher by from your life by interviewing them. So let's watch our Great Thanksgiving Listen animation for this year. It's called Dear Mrs. Doyle, and it's about two teachers. So let's take a look.
We talked about decorating the Christmas tree when I came home from school that day. But I walked into the living room and my aunt was there. And she said, well, honey, Mommy passed away this morning. And I remember at my mother's wake, someone in my family came to me and said, Johnny, your teacher's here.
When I found out she died, I could certainly relate to that. Because when I was 11, my own father died. And you just don't know how you're going to go on without that person.
When I returned to school, you waited until the other children left the room at the end of the day, and you told me that you were there if I needed you, and you bent over and kissed me on the head. It was really the only time someone said to me, I know what you're feeling, and I know what you're missing. And I felt in a very real way that things really would be okay.
Well, John, I really loved you as a student, and I'm so glad that I could be there with you for that time.
Many years later, when I became a teacher, I started to think more and more about you. And I started to think to myself, here I am with a memory of a teacher who changed my life. And I've never told her that. And that's why I finally wrote this letter. Dear Mrs. Doyle, if you are not the Cecile Doyle who taught English at Emerson School in Kearney, New Jersey, then I'm embarrassed, and you can disregard the sentiments that follow. My name is John Cruitt, and I was in your third grade class during the 1958-1959 school year. 2 days before Christmas, my mother passed away, and you told me that you were there if I needed you. I hope life has been as kind to you as you were to me. God bless you, always. With great fondness, John.
And your letter could not have come at a better time, because my husband had Parkinson's and he was going downhill, and I had just come home from the hospital and I read this beautiful letter and I just was overwhelmed.
Well, the funny thing is, when I finally wrote to you again after 54 years, I typed a letter. I was afraid my penmanship wasn't going to meet your standards. Well, after all this time, Mrs. Doyle, all I can say to you is thank you.
John, what can I say? I'm just glad that we made a difference in each other's life.
I'm going to pass it back to Kelly for questions for Jason.
Yeah, thanks for passing it back to me right after that powerful movie. I've got some tears coming down my eyes. I'm getting text messages from folks listening. Yeah,
well,
wow, this is so powerful.
The theme of the webinar, for sure. Perfectly aligned. Yeah.
Yes. Whew. Okay, so Jason, there's a lot of questions that have come in, and I know the chat box is moving really fast and furious. But one teacher asked, what is one piece of advice you would give young people to tell their story and perspective of the world, and or how U.S. political events impact them?
It's a good question. I think. Listen, it's a tricky question though. If you're asking me what advice would I give as a teacher, right? Which is what I'm going to assume, because it's different. The advice I would give may be different than the advice perhaps a teacher would give. But what I would say is that I think the one thing about ELA classes is that we teach the E and the L. I don't know if we teach the A very much. And I think this is an opportunity to enforce the A, to enforce the art part of expression, right? It's language arts. It's not language science, right? Though we treat it like it's language science. And I would argue that if you want them to express themselves about anything, let alone the political climate, I think we make sure that they understand that the creative elements of writing don't have to have the same rules. that there's a freedom to it, and they should feel that freedom when they want to express it. If they want to write, if they want to scribble their feelings across the lines, if that's what they feel like they need to do, if it's all caps, if that's what they feel like they need to do, if it's in a rap or a poem or some sort of song, if it's just a series of words, a list, all of those things should count as a way for them to express themselves, a creative way for them to express themselves about how they feel and to tell their own stories.
Thank you for that. Another question that's come in, there's a lot, so I'm trying to sift through them fast, and they're coming in very fast. My question is, now seeing that we have to face what we have to face for the next 4 years, how do you see the next 4 years for aspiring authors, and how can I climb out of this hole and get my stories out into the world? I'm a 35-year-old Afro-Caribbean woman from the South that creates culturally affirming stories for all children.
I mean, so how do I see for authors, what does this look like? Well, I think that's another one of those tricky questions, you know, because I think we have to make the differentiation between being an author and being a writer. Being an author is a person who has written a book. Typically, we use it as a way to sort of delineate someone who has been published. Whether or not, it doesn't matter who's in the top political seat. My job as a writer it never changes. Right. I work every day as a writer, whether my work is ever seen or not. Now, in terms of what happens to publishing, we've been fighting far before this moment. Our books have been censored and banned, and publishing companies have begun to self-censor and be afraid because they're a business and the bottom line is being affected because of censorship and banning and this, that, and the third. And all of that will still continue. It does not mean that you should stop writing, and it does not mean that you should stop trying to get your work in the world, right? Like, your job is to do your job, right? That's all I can really tell you. You keep the main thing the main thing, and the main thing is for you to make your work. Somebody will find that work, and somebody will give that work to the world. But your job in this moment is to not be distracted by the things that we can't actually control right now, right? Your job is to control the thing that you can control. Do your work. We need to see it. We need to read it. And there will be a publisher who will give you a swing. And I own my own agency now. So if you want somebody to look at it, just know I'm gonna be honest with you, and that doesn't mean I can sign you, you know what I mean? But I own an agency too, and if you want somebody to look at it, if you really believe in it, you can find me and shoot it to me. I'll check it out. Now, everybody who heard that, don't start bombarding my email with, you know what I mean? It's like, because then they're gonna be like, he said. I'm talking to her. You know what I mean?
I love it. Yeah, I'm trying to sift through all of these. I've got one, let's see here. Oh, where'd it go? Jason, I teach in a predominantly Black and brown school, and students are feeling raw and vulnerable after the results of this election. What is your message to young Black women about how to navigate hope in a time like this?
That's tricky, right? Because I'm not a Black woman. I do love Black women. And so all I can say is, I'm sorry. And also, it's interesting, right? Because there's a part of me, it's such an unfair, the thing about Black women is they will survive. Right? They will persist. It's like, it's this thing that they should not have to do, but it's the thing that they know how to do perhaps better than every single other person on the planet. They know how to get by. They know how to keep pushing forward. They know how to stand in the middle of the fire and not burn, or at least give the illusion that they're not burning. And it's an unfortunate superpower to have, but a necessary one in the lives of so many Black women in this country, right? So the truth is that, like, I wish I had advice. I should be asking for advice from them about what I'm supposed to do and how can I make it, because the truth of the matter is that they've always had the answers to those questions. They've always made they've always, if you look through history, Black women have always been on the right side of history. I'm talking at every turn. And we don't give them the credit that they deserve, but we should. Because I'm talking all the way back, including when Black men chose differently, white men, white women. It doesn't matter what the scenario is, all the way back. I mean, it was even Zora Neale Hurston who spoke out against Brown versus Board of Education because she realized that inherently it was a racist law, because it said that Black kids would do better in white schools, but it did not say that white kids would do better in Black schools. And so you had all these brilliant Black teachers who lost their jobs and Black babies suddenly believing that the education they was already getting wasn't enough. That's an inherently racist law. And it was a Black woman who spoke out about it. We can go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. They have always been on the right side. So instead of me giving them advice, I'll give everybody else advice and say, listen to them and go the way in which they go.
Thank you for that. And I'm asking some of our team members to drop an incredibly powerful blog written by one of my colleagues, Natalie Dean, who's a Black woman who's really reflecting on a lot of things that you're just touching on with some great strategies. It was very, very moving. So we'll make sure to share that with everybody in this webinar. So we probably have time for maybe one or two more questions. How do we teach kindness and tell kids that how we treat each other matters when they are seeing leadership and TikToks or people who do the exact opposite and still have success? I teach fourth grade at a conservative private school that was open during the 50s. There's so much resistance.
That's a good one. I don't know. You know, it's a tricky thing. I honestly try to be honest about that, which I don't have answers to on the spot. It would be something I'd have to kind of think, you know, mull a bit, but I'd like to say something cliche, like we have to lead by example, you know. But the other thing that I really, look, for kids, we have to teach empathy and kindness, right? And it is very important that we do so. But I'm gonna be very honest with you all, as an adult, though my heart wants to know that someone else is kind, though my heart wants to believe that someone else doesn't hate me, I know for a fact that someone does. And what I really want, more than their affection, the affection of people who don't care about my well-being, what I want more than that is for the laws in which we all live under to protect me from the hate. Not from the ethereal ideas around hate, but from the physical manifestations of that hate, right? So my neighbor down the street has a right to hate me if they want. They just don't have a right for that hate to get in the way of my life, right? So like when I think about it from this perspective up here, it's like, look, I need to make sure, which also means, folks, that we need to be involved in our local politics. We need to make sure we're voting on everything. School boards, get involved with your school board. Get involved with, like, right, these are the things that we should be considering, you know, because I think then we have the opportunity to really change the temperature of some things, and then we can lead by a different example that might actually change the children, right? Perhaps, you know. But in terms of directly teaching kindness, I should be asking you, you know, how do you do it every day in class?
Yeah, thank you for touching on this. I'm going to ask one more question, which I think is really related to what you said. And I will also say that I am on my local school board in Alexandria, Virginia, and getting involved in politics is just so important. And public education and the power of public education is so incredibly important. We need good people on school boards. So the last question, Jason, and then Dave, I'll bring you back up to help close things out with me, is how do we give space to our peers right now so that they have the tools to give space to our students?
You know, I like this idea around, you know, I was doing some work in like these independent schools, these very fancy schools around the country, and they all have these like programs called affinity spaces and all this, that, and the third. And it's basically just, they create safe spaces for people to vent, to say the things. And I think that we have to figure out space to give our peers the same things without judgment or shame. It's tricky having colleagues because professionalism sort of has all these, like, you know, it's like things that we have to adhere to in, as far as professionalism goes. But if any of these colleagues bleed into friendship, I think we sort of create boundary for them. We create one of those, and I mean this metaphorically, one of those rec rooms, you know, those rooms where you just smash everything in the room, you know. I think it's okay, because the truth is, I think that adults aren't allowed to express their anger. We're expected to just like go on and move on with it. But the truth is, some of us are upset, some of us are angry, and that anger is a real thing, and it's a true emotion, and it deserves to live outside of our bodies. So at any given moment, if we can allow somebody else to scream, I think we should do so. If we can allow somebody else, if it means that we need to meet up before school to have whatever we need to have to make sure that when we walk in here to argue and fight or scream or vent or whatever, so when we walk in and talk to these kids, we can do it with a pure heart, then let's do that, right? All the things that adults need to do to manage and cope, we should do it. We should do so without judgment, and do so from pure intention, knowing that we're all in the same boat, doing the best thing for these babies, you know?
Jason, wow. This was just so incredibly powerful. I can't thank you enough for joining us today. Dave, and thank you again for bringing this to us and bringing Jason to our Share My Lesson AFT community. We're just thrilled to have you. Dave, I'm going to give you a final few words, and then I'm just going to close out a couple of things. And then I'm also going to make a plug and challenge to everyone here to say, try the Great Thanksgiving Listen. Try it. If you do it, email us at Share My Lesson. Let us know that you've done it. We'll find some goodies to send you your way. So please give it a shot. And then we'd love to be able to highlight some of the work from folks who participated on this webinar today if you do the Great Thanksgiving Listen this year. So Dave, final remarks, and then I will close this out.
Thanks, Kelly. And thanks again to you, to the AFT, for everybody who came on a Sunday at the last minute, and especially to Jason. You know, listening to Jason, just a quick final story. There was a StoryCorps interview from a bunch of years ago between a dad and his son. And the son had served in several tours in Afghanistan. His name was Zach Skiles. And his dad, Scott, sat down for a StoryCorps interview with him. And they talked for the first time about what he had seen in Afghanistan. And when Zach came back from service, he had very severe PTSD. He ended up homeless. They talked about this for the first time. And I met Scott, the dad, at an event after they did this interview, and Scott was on the mend. He was in rehab and ended up actually getting a PhD. But Scott handed me a sheet of paper and he said, "This has been really helpful to me. And I wanted to share it with you." And I opened it up, and it was just one line, a simple quote from a theologian I'd never heard of named Frederick Buechner. And it said, "Here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid." So that's my wish for all of you. Don't be afraid. Don't ever give up. Keep uplifting and caring for and loving your students no matter what. We're so thankful to all of you. We're thankful for the luminous work you do. Keep on, always. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. And it looks like we've got some folks that are going to give it a shot with the Great Thanksgiving Listen. So for those of you who said yes or not sure, that's awesome. Please let us know. Oh, you're getting thumbs up from Jason. I mean, come on. Let us know. So that way, you know, if you do it, send us an email at Share My Lesson. You can also, you know, put the link on Share My Lesson so we can highlight it. And I'm going to push that URL right here. This is where you can find the Great Thanksgiving Listen resources. And there's also a great one-pager. So there's a kind of the longer PDF, but then a short, you know, this is how you do it, and do it with your students. So please take advantage of that. I also want to highlight that we are wrapping up our 2024 AFT Book Club series. Here are all the incredible authors. And Jason, we're including you here. We know that you're an author. We've done this incredible series throughout the year, and we'll be announcing our 2025 book club speakers very soon. So I encourage you to join the AFT Book Club, which should be opening up for you right now. And then for any of you who are learning, this is a little bit of shift of topic area, but if any of you are learning about the AI, I do an AI educator brain, and we are doing one on prompting, and we've got somebody partnering with us from OpenAI, a prompt engineer who will be joining us on Tuesday this week. So feel free to please join that particular webinar. I will open that link for you right now. And then finally, a big ask is to please rate and review this webinar on Share My Lesson. The link should be popping up right now. We'd like to, it helps elevate the content that we have on Share My Lesson. If you've ever heard about algorithms with any of the social media, we have the same kind of thing on Share My Lesson, and this webinar is recorded, will be available on demand. And we want, you know, other educators to be able to access this great content that we have here. So with that, Jason, you get the last word today, and thank you.
I don't have anything else. I love y'all, and I'm around supporting y'all and rooting for you every step of the way.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all to all our educators. We so love you and value you and see you and hear you. Thank you.